But first, Australian pride and our Western culture, they're being erased by our bureaucratic elites. And today we saw very serious examples of this cultural destruction. The most dramatic was Victoria's Labor government apologising to the 1% of Victorians identifying as aborigines for the supposed horrors of colonialism committed by the state parliament.
For the tears shed in the dark, for the stolen generation, for the violence committed under the banner of the state, we say sorry.
And already a fact check, in fact, a massive fact check. What stolen generation was Premier Allen apologising for? In Victoria, there never was one. In 2003, a Stolen Generations task force, led by an Aboriginal activist, Jim Berg, and appointed by a state Labor government, concluded there had in fact been no formal policy for removing children from Aboriginal parents in the state. None. Even more startling, the task force found 36 organisations were supposedly helping the state's stolen generations, yet the task force did not identify one truly stolen child. Not one. And by that I mean a child stolen from their parents just for being Aboriginal, even though this task force has run advertisements pleading for them to come forward. Instead, and here's the thing, the task force used a broad and I think deceitful definition of stolen generations to mean those separated at a young age from community or family, language, land or culture, as well as the families of that separated child, which turned out to include children who'd been abused or abandoned, or even children who just complained they'd been sent by their parents to boarding school. And that is not stolen. Not in my book, and I doubt in yours. So why did the Premier today spread that toxic falsehood? Apologise for something that never happened. Now, but she's got an Aboriginal truth-telling commission called URIC. What a farce that is. Why didn't it tell these truths? Instead, we get this joy in wallowing in white guilt and also in white cash. I mean, I talk about an Aboriginal industry for a reason. And on that, more news today. The Victorian government tried to hide documents that gave that game away. But thanks to an FII request, the Herald Sun could today report that not only does this Labor government's new treaty with Aboriginal activists supercharge compensation payments to Aborigines, but the government has already handed over more than $100 million to just two Aboriginal groups already, including to one as chief executive, clearly, despite his splendid feathers, also has substantial white ancestry himself, the ancestry of the supposed oppressors. And this, of course, raises the question, and not just, who should really be getting these payments, people whose own ancestors include colonisers? While people like me with ancestors born overseas, we should pay them? There's also this, though. For what was Premier Allen today actually apologising? Apart from a stolen generation history in Victoria, which doesn't seem to exist. Was she apologising for these colonisers bringing democracy, Western medicine, oh sorry about that, the rule of law, literacy, and modern farming techniques that have ensured that no Aborigines would ever again starve to death in a famine? Oh, I do apologise for that. And for then developing a welfare system delivering tens of billions of dollars a year to Aboriginal Australians. None of the good of colonisation was mentioned today. None of the good that lets descendants of Aborigines live in comforts now unknown in traditional Aboriginal societies. So you've got to ask why our politicians vilify our past like this, why they raise resentments, divide us by race. And I think it can only be explained by the fashionable shame that the elites feel of the West, of our past, of their race, of Australia. Only that can explain it. That self-hating shame. Only that could allow this ludicrous exercise of dividing us by race and apologising for a history that actually included much good among the bad. At least praise the Liberals and National parties for refusing today to back that apology and for rejecting this racist idea of inherited shame to be felt by people who weren't even alive at the time of the alleged crime, often whose ancestors weren't even in Australia. But I ask Labor what good they truly think they're doing and what support they think they have for this divisive and performative apology and this dishonest rewriting of our history. Because I'm certain that they know that most Victorians reject this. I mean, why else do they keep secret how easy the treaty will now make it for Aboriginal activists to get massive handouts? No wonder the activists love the treaty and this whole race industry. But that secrecy, that tells me that Labor knows this taxpayer-funded pity party is too much for most Australians, particularly at this cost of living crisis. But there's one other story this week I want to mention that shows how a shame of our traditions risks destroying exactly what has made this country so secure and safe that millions have come from around the world to share our good luck. The Australian yesterday reported that a federal court judge has ruled that key evidence behind the decision of former Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek to block a $1 billion Blaney gold mine development will be locked away for up to 30 years. Now, Justice James Stelios said he wanted to protect what he considers cultural sensitivities and to uphold Indigenous traditional law by stopping the rest of us from knowing just what these alleged Aboriginal beliefs were that stopped the mine. Now, our British inherited Western tradition is open justice. Now, here's the reasons a court relied on to make that decision. No secrets, check for yourself. Except, of course, in very limited circumstances, usually involving, say, things like national security or whatever. But instead of upholding that tradition, this judge, who was unusually appointed last year straight from academia, ruled that while I consider that a confidentiality order over the oral representations will have a detrimental impact on open justice, bad for open justice, I accept that the Wiradjuri traditional owner Central West Aboriginal Corporation's defence in this proceeding of the making of the declaration should not come at the cost of culturally sensitive information being publicly disclosed, which turns out to be very convenient for this group of alleged traditional owners, headed by this man, who've been promoting sacred site claims of this artist, Nairi Reynolds, who was backed by another leader of this Wiradjuri traditional owners group, Lisa Payton, all claiming a sacred bee would be disturbed by the mine's tailings dam. A claim actually questioned by a well-known anthropologist, Dr. Philip Clark, and by another and better-known Wiradjuri group. In fact, that other group included well-known Wiradjuri leader Roy R.C., who said this ban, he was dead against it, the ban on reading this court evidence, it would let self-appointed traditional owners block projects with bastardised claims of Aboriginal culture, and all without fear of public scrutiny, he said. The courts are just going to hide their evidence, or so-called evidence. And he said, these people can now use this process to set up a corporation, come out, call themselves a traditional owner, and then bang, you can stop a major project. Now, whether it's those other Wiradjuri people I mentioned, the ones talking about sacred bees, who will specifically be protected by this gag order, I can't be absolutely sure. There's a gag order, we're not to know. Files are sealed. Because the Western culture of open justice has now given way here to an Aboriginal culture of secret business. And that scares me. Because personally, I think we're all safer living under Australian law, Western ways, than Aboriginal. But dare we now even say that? Because that's one more British or Western tradition being erased. Free speech, along with reason, as our elites pander to the tribal and to the mystical instead.